Welcome everyone to the Asia Regional Cities and Nature Briefing for June 2025. We are really excited today to continue the topic of blue-green nature-based solutions in an urban context, and we have exciting speakers for you today to share about that and a quick discussion that we will want to have with our audience today. We already did a quick introduction of our team earlier, and I welcome anyone here in the chat to mention where you're from, and there are some instructions there also of optional of a place that you're inspired by. And today we will have Danish from IUCN Pakistan, as well as Takehiro Watanabe, who is from Sophia University in Tokyo, to be sharing with us some blue-green nature-based solutions in their area. So I'll pass it on to Meherwan to introduce our first speaker. Meherwan, please.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Mika. It's my pleasure to introduce Danish Rushdie from the IUCN Pakistan Program Office, who has been working for the past 11 years with multiple private and public stakeholders, as well as unconventional actors, including the armed forces, to make nature-based solutions in the urban and suburban contexts possible. A lot of work that he's done in the past and continues to do is mangrove restoration works. A lot of these are near the Indus River Delta and their surrounding areas. And he's going to speak to us a little bit about the opportunities, challenges, experiences, lessons from his works in mangrove restoration. Really excited to have Danish on board. I have done a collaboration with him in the past, and it's fantastic to have him as a speaker. Mika, I'll share Danish's slides, if that's good now. Okay. Fantastic. Danish, please.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you very much to the Urban Hub Unit for inviting me to this forum. I'm basically from Karachi, the city which I'm going to talk to you about. Karachi is primarily Pakistan's largest metropolitan city, and it's an economic hub. It is home to around 20 million people and has an extensive coastline along the Arabian Sea. So despite its strategic importance and a vibrant economy, Karachi faces mounting environmental challenges that threaten the city's ecosystems, public health, and long-term resilience. Karachi has not been always like that. In the past, it used to be a very planned city, but over the last 3 decades, we've seen massive rapid urbanization, industrial growth, and very unsustainable practices which have actually accelerated degradation of the natural environment that we see. We have many laws, but the basic issue, like in any other sectors, the basic issue we face is the lack of implementation of those laws. So some of the basic issues I'll very quickly summarize are facing Karachi environmentally. Our coastal erosion, it's a city by the coast. Coastal erosion is very severe. It endangers vulnerable communities living on the coastlines of Karachi, its infrastructure, and critical coastal ecosystems such as mangroves even. And that also leads to biodiversity loss because urbanization is unchecked. We continue to reclaim land along the sea as wherever it's possible actually for the authorities, they continue to do so. And pollution goes unchecked. There has been a rapid decline as a result in both marine and terrestrial biodiversity, diminishing Karachi's ecological richness and natural resilience. For instance, out of 8 turtles that used to visit our beaches near Sandspit and Hawke's Bay, only 4 species come now. Some of the very well-known aquatic birds have also disappeared over time. Then we have the climate change impacts, heat waves, urban flooding are very rampant. And people, especially living in low-lying areas, because Karachi is actually below sea level. So those people are severely affected because of this. Air pollution is severe. It is maybe not as severe as it is in another major city, which is Lahore, mainly because we've been blessed with good sea breeze. But even then, we have unmanaged, unplanned vehicular traffic that is not being regulated. Construction activities continue. So, that's the kind of challenges we face. Then we have waste or water pollution. Water bodies are heavily contaminated due to untreated sewage, industrial effluents, and waste management systems are almost ineffective. I mean, with these some recent Chinese investments, we are seeing some, respite in this kind of situation. But still, there is a long way for us to go in terms of managing the waste that actually is also even dumped into the seas. Mangroves, why? Because over the last few years, we've seen a lot of appetite in the private sector and even in the local authorities to, go for mangroves restoration drives. So if we look at in terms of the challenges that we face, mangroves used to be covering around 3,000 hectares, along Karachi's coast, but over the last 15 years or so, we have seen rapid decline in mangroves cover. But the good news now is a recent report undertaken by IUCN Pakistan of its mangroves cover shows that while the overall forest cover has decreased, the only forests that have increased are mangroves. And I'll tell you why, mainly because we come to the initiatives now. Like I said, 2015 onwards, we have seen increasing interest in the private sector to go for sustainability work. They used to call it CSR. Conventionally, it used to be more focused on health and education. But with IUCN advising them, they have taken on mangrove restoration work through which as nature-based solutions to, put up a first line of defense against sea intrusion, curbing coastal erosion, all of that. So I'll give you some glimpses of the, Mervan, just a slide before this one. These are the companies that actually came to IUCN. We forged alliances with them, and they showed interest in many other ecosystem-related work, but primarily mangroves was a primary work they wanted to do with IUCN. IUCN's largest program, in Asia was the Mangroves for the Future program, under which, there was lots of awareness in these companies about, mangrove restoration and how ecosystems thrive. So they have all switched their CSR from education and health more towards environment. So these are some of the companies that we work with. I'll show you some slides which will just show a glimpse of the kind of work we've done. Next, please. This work was done with Angro LNG. Angro has been our strategic partner since 2015, and they have helped plant mangroves over 500 hectares. Plantation happens with the support of the coastal communities living there, which also helps us gain their ownership of the project, and they also are heavily engaged in long-term maintenance of mangroves. We also sensitize communities because a lot of these communities have camels with them. So, we have to prevent grazing in those areas where mangroves have been planted. Next, please. Similarly, the same work we've done with Sweet Southern Gas. And next, more or less the components have been similar. Angro Foundation, they have initiated mangroves cover, mangrove restoration work towards improving coastal sustainability. It also involves sensitizing coastal communities about the benefits of mangroves as an ecosystem, and by training CBO members and community workers. It also provides them direct labor and, and helps them improve their livelihood over the long run, as is known for mangroves. Next, please. But these have so far been, one-on-one interaction with these companies. We have had training sessions with these local folks in the fishermen communities also. It's not just mangroves. We have also focused on conserving biodiversity, especially I was talking to you about turtles. So turtle conservation has also been an integral component of such work that we've done. Next, please. Yes, next, please. We have celebrated environmental days with them. And then obviously, yes, next slide, Mervan. And then companies also, private sector companies want mileage out of this kind of work that they do. So, there comes a time when they have to showcase the work they've done. They invite all and many other private sector corporations also to come. Governments are there. Even defense forces do participate in our events. And it has shown a very encouraging effect in the sense that when they see 2-3 major private sector companies doing something different from what they used to do in the CSR, many other companies have also approached IUCN to join hands with them to work towards mangrove restoration. Next, please. So this used to be a one-on-one initiative, following which we came up with the idea of collaborating, forming a platform which we called the Karachi Conservation, and which was established with the objective of conserving biodiversity in industrial operations. And then it also was to create long-term economic value for the private sector through shared value initiatives, involve members in restoration work. IUCN's role was to provide technical advice, whereas the regulator, the Broadcasting Authority, was the main supporting agency that would facilitate all these companies in doing environmental work. Governments have also been involved. PQA comes under the government, federal government. These are some of the potential projects that were included in the initial phase of the Karachi Conservation Platform. These mangrove recreational park and conservation, these were done. We did extensive solid waste management at the post-Qasim industrial zone. Air quality monitoring was done. Let me tell you that before this, none of this was happening in these areas, mainly because, like I said, there were laws, regulations, but nothing was being implemented. IUCN's role was mainly to assist them, sensitize them, make them aware of the issues that they will face in the longer run if they don't protect the environment at this stage. So there was a lot of reciprocation from their side as well. Next, please. This was one of our pillar projects under the Karachi Conservation. 1 billion mangroves were planted in one single day in collaboration with the Sindh Forest and Wildlife Department. And we have later around 1,500 hectares. Next, please. The other thing that we did was the formation of a national coordinating body, because issues pertaining to the coast, and especially Karachi is an integral part of the entire coastline. There used to be no mechanism whereby different agencies would come together and discuss the challenges or environmental issues that the coast faced. So we initiated what we call the National Coordinating Body of the Coast, which brought in different stakeholders: the Sindh Coastal Development Authority, the Forest Department, Wildlife Department, and Sindh Environmental Protection Agency, and Pakistan Navy and Pakistan Coast Guards. These were unconventional partners that actually showed a lot of interest, and we invited them to become part of this body. Their involvement has actually given us access to a lot of sites, where otherwise work was not being done. They have actually also, this body, the National Coordinating Body, has also helped create two of Pakistan's main marine protected areas. One is Astola, the other is Cherna Island. Next, please. And under the same project, next, please. Yes, these are just members. It's chaired by the Ministry of Climate Change, and IUCN is also a partner in this. Then we've got Pakistan Navy, Coastal Development Authority, and some private sector companies. So another initiative under this was the promotion of constructed wetlands for wastewater treatment, in which to process around 30,000 gallons of wastewater a day from Pakistan Navy facilities. It started off with one. They have at least 7 right now across Karachi. So this saves millions of gallons of fresh water annually for them. With Navy, we have also collaborated in mangroves restoration. You can see from this picture that they are very passionately involved in this work. In fact, every year they approach us. We have a mechanism whereby we go to the fields, assess new sites, and then do mangrove restoration with the forces. So a lot of them have been very, very forthcoming, and through this, IUCN has gained a lot of access and visibility across the sector. Yes, so 8 million mangroves have been planted in as of 2024. There will also be some challenges. Like I said, there is very weak enforcement of environmental regulations. I mentioned about the Sindh Environment Protection Agency. We very lightly, on a very lighter note, we say that they never refuse an NOC to any company, which is obviously not a good thing. And so they have been under a lot of pressure because there have been citizens who have become very well aware of the current situation. There are pressure groups now who are convincing them to make sure the environment remains protected and, should not be treated the way it's been treated over the last 30 years now. Then, of course, this goes still unchecked, the urban expansion, and there is land mafia that continues to influence. There's a lot of development taking place, and the government, despite its claims, still not doing anything about it. And even though there is general awareness is there, majority of the masses are entangled with the basic issues and issues with basic amenities, which is why environment falls, in the third and fourth category, which is why there's very limited awareness also amongst the citizens. There is obviously insufficient funding because nature-based solutions are nothing new, but for Karachiites, this is still a new term, and many are still not aware of its efficacy and how the kind of solution it may provide to the city overall. Institutional gaps still exist despite the national coordinating body that we developed, because it's obviously not a government functioning body. It's an informal body, but which does invite all these stakeholders, but we still see a lot of coordination gaps. And lastly, climate change is there and unavoidable. We have seen, massive flooding in recent years and prolonged heat waves that still are there. So that's all from my side. I hope I finished it within time. Thank you.
Thanks, Danish. That was fantastic. Let's leave
you.
some of the challenges that we were discussing and we'll pick them up later. But thank you so much for sharing. This was really, really insightful, and lots of photos and stuff was great as well. Mika, I'll hand it over to you to introduce the next speaker.
Thank you, Danish, and thanks, Meherwan. We will carry on quickly with our next presentation so that we will have more time for discussion. And I'd like to introduce Dr. Takehiro Watanabe, who is an associate professor at Sophia University in Tokyo, Japan. His research focuses on industrial pollution, natural resource management, wildlife conservation, and urban ecology. He's also a member of Zenpukuji-gawa wo Satogawa ni Kaeru Kai, which is a community group in Tokyo that's seeking to restore the Zenpukuji River. And he'll talk a bit about a project that's done there. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mika. And thanks to the Urban Biodiversity Hub for giving me this opportunity to talk about this project in Tokyo. And as many of you know, Tokyo is a very big city. And this particular location is, here's a map of sort of the area. It's on the western part of the city. It is still considered to be central to the city itself. It's one of the 23 wards, which constitutes the central wards in the city. And the project really is based on this idea of how to connect this city or our neighborhood, our city, with nature in a way that's very meaningful, that's inclusive, and that also can be long-lasting, sustainable. So that's sort of where we're at. The Osonaigawa Brook, which I'll be talking about, is at the headwaters of this larger river called Zenpukuji River, which I'm involved in kind of helping this organization restore this river. And there's a separate group called Osonaigawa Brook that manages, with the help of the local government, this little brook called Osonaigawa Brook. And I just wanted to mention that Mr. Nakamura, who's with us today right here in this session, is the government staff in Suginami Ward government, who is part of the department that's responsible for managing this brook. So I just wanted to just mention that he's here, although what I'm going to be talking about today is not reflective of what they think. It's really my own personal take on this. So so let me talk a little bit more about the brook. It's as you can imagine, it's a very urbanized area. However, we have these pockets of green spaces that that are really important for the local neighborhoods and so on. And this, what's really special about this particular brook is that this was something that was really initiated by school children. That this specific curriculum that's focused on rivers were at the basis of how this brook came into fruition. So I'll explain a little bit about that. It's also, we realize that there are ecological problems with this, that this whole river and this particular brook, which used to be an irrigation canal actually, was in very bad state. It was encased in concrete. It was covered up. It wasn't really accessible like this that you see in this picture today. But this stream, which is about 150 meters long, I think, is it was through the collaboration of schools, of local residents, of government offices, of which Mr. Nakamura is part of, university partners, so on and so forth, that we were able to restore this into a vibrant stream. So today it's used not only for like habitat ecology observation involving children, and it's also a site for many local schools that use it as an educational site, and it's also used for management, at the local level, so that the local community members can also take part in the maintenance and the monitoring of this little stream. And in 2023, it was designated as an OECM site by Japan's Ministry of the Environment. And if you're interested, I can talk more about that in the Q&A session. So again, what makes this really stand out, and this is part of the OECM application that we submitted to the government, is that it was really the school and the school children that were at the center of learning, designing, and then later on presenting their plans to the local government. So this took probably, if you include all the years in which this kind of came into fruition, it probably took over 10 years. And this is one of the, I guess, Mika had asked me to talk about the frameworks used. So I was thinking about that question of frameworks, and there I can think of at least two frameworks that this maybe is part of. One is the fact that this was a river-centered curriculum, that in the 1990s, the educators and it's actually social workers who were responding to issues like youth violence, gang activity, truancy, social withdrawal, these kinds of more social problems, that they kind of started to think about the river as a possible place where children can better connect to nature and also connect to the local community. And this particular school, the Yogi Elementary School, took this kind of idea with the help of local members, local people who were engaged with local community activities, to develop a 6-year curriculum, grades 1 through 6, that integrated things like nature observation, bird watching, water quality testing, species monitoring, and so on. And this became very successful. And out of that activity came this idea of, let's try to look at this one very short 150-meter section of the river and see if we can pitch to the government some ideas that the children drew. So on this picture, if you look at the top right-hand side, you see a student, I think she was in 6th grade at that time, explaining these drawings that she and her classmates drew. They later submitted these drawings to the government, and that's where the government earmarked this project. The drawings are also analyzed by landscape architects and river engineers to really try to pull out some of the design principles so that they can be used when they were actually designing this particular water space. The other framework is really the local river. I call them the local river advocates, but they're basically involved in urban stream restoration, and these are led primarily by the local environmentalists, river engineers, and so on. These actors have been working for a long time to try to restore the larger river, the longer river, the Zambukiji River, and when those two kind of groups got together, the school people and then the river people, this really came into fruition. Some of the stakeholders involved. This is, by the way, some of the pictures of the way that this little brook is used today. Primarily, this is some events where we have for children, and they are involved in sort of civic monitoring, citizens monitoring. Children like draw things, and also we're right now currently trying to daylight another section of the river. So the picture on the bottom left side is a drawing, with blue chalk of where we want the river to be daylighted. So the stakeholders involved, and this is sort of I think the last slide, where I try to answer some of Mika's questions about stakeholders and other things. But so some of the stakeholders involved, we already talked about the framework, but the stakeholders involved, or the school is really important, and it's particularly this particular school that was central. And schools are important because you have the teachers involved, you have the parents involved, you have the PTA involved, you have the alumni network, which later on I'll talk about with the older folks in the community. You have neighborhood associations, you have local businesses. So the school became sort of an institutional hub for various stakeholders. There are also the river advocates, which is basically the local NGOs, nonprofit organizations, and so on, amateur naturalists, bird watchers, community organizers, artists, and so on. They were also became part of this project. We also had the government, and there's various, as you probably are all aware of, there are various levels of government, and oftentimes they're very siloed. So we had, for example, with this project, you have the river managers at the Tokyo Metropolitan Government level, the park people who are at the metropolitan government level. At the more local level, we had the Department of Education, Department of Social Welfare, department that deals with environmental issues, the construction department, which Mr. Nakamura is part of. So there's all these various departments within the government and various levels, also work together. I mean, ultimately with OECM, we also had the National Ministry of the Environment involved as well. And then we had the experts, right? The biologists, the hydrologists, the landscape designers, the educational researchers, and so on and so forth, who provided the technical knowledge. Many of them also brought, because they're affiliated with universities, were able to bring in like university students into the mix. So what enabled the success? I'm going to try to make it short because I know I'm running out of time. But so I thought about this last night and came up with 5 different things. One, again, the school as an institutional hub. I think that really made a big difference. The second thing is really these river advocates as catalysts for change. Because they were able to bring in their expertise, their networks into this, their resources as well. And and oftentimes these river advocates try to ensure that the community voices, especially those of children, were really incorporated into the design decisions and other types of decisions. So that was very, I think, profound in this particular initiative. We also had these kinds of conditions in the city, governance conditions and ecological conditions that made it really feasible. The brook largely fell within the Suginami Ward jurisdiction, which allowed it to make the decision-making process much more streamlined. The fact that it was very upstream made it ecologically viable because it was free from sewage inflow. The policy timing really made sense because the government was starting to get interested in things like green infrastructure and nature-based solutions. And we had schools and NGOs who are also trying to experiment with things like place-based learning, participatory education, and so on and so forth. Fourth, this intergenerational transmission of lost knowledge is something that we were really conscious of because many of the teachers in school now in like my age, in their 40s and 50s, they have already lost that knowledge of how to like play with nature, how to play in rivers and so on. So we had to learn from the elders in their 70s and 80s, and they had to transmit their knowledge to the kids. So we kind of had to skip a generation to do that. So this kind of intergenerational transmission of knowledge was very important. And finally, again, not to repeat myself again, but the idea that these children became central to this, that they learned how to actually enable social change in their community was, I think, a big learning experience for them, and it was also a learning experience for us as people who are supporting this initiative. So let me stop here. So thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much, Taksan. I was just typing down all the things that I learned from your presentation, and before we jump into a great discussion, I can already foresee lots of people wanting to put in their thoughts as well. We often in our briefings have a photo taking right in the middle of the session when we know that people are ready to just show their faces, give us a quick smile, and we'll take a quick group photo before we continue with the discussion on a whiteboard. So I will just ask if you can turn on your cameras. If you can't, that's all right. And we'll just be taking screenshots of everyone. So prepare your smiles, and in 3, 2, 1. One more just in case we didn't manage to get the previous one to work. In 3, 2, 1. Great, thank you. And we will continue again to have a quick discussion on what we just heard. I am going to share a whiteboard, and I hope you can see it loading. So everyone here who is on Zoom should be able to see the whiteboard, and we're just going to start filling it in with sort of the key messages from the previous presentations. And I remember already one of the key lessons that I heard from Taksan from his presentation about the Zempukji River was the power of working with children and their visions for a better environment. So I could even just put that here. And I really felt that there was a lot of people coming together of the community to really make this vision come to life, right? And we wanted to then also use this time to, if there's any questions from the audience, please feel free to either unmute yourself and share your question. I might take a few questions if there are many at a time, but otherwise you can also use the chat box and write down your question or comments for our speakers. But I thought to start with, well, actually a question that Taksan has already answered in his presentation. So I'll ask this question to Danish. What were some of the enablers or the factors that made your all the different initiatives that you did in Pakistan a success? We heard that there were lots of private sector involvement and as well as sort of platforms for these discussions and collaborations. So maybe to hear from you, Danish, what were some of the enablers that
You
made
see,
it?
Mohammed, like I said, that initially, like if we were to do this around 10, 15 years ago, we would not see a very receptive private sector. Private sector with hardly any appetite for sustainability work. They used to call it CSR, eventually shifted to sustainability, and now they're even moving towards carbon credits. So we had a very receptive private sector with us, who, when we approached them, they were not only receptive, they had the budget, they had the appetite to do this kind of work. Not only this, they were not looking at isolated events or projects. They were looking at long-term, which is why our continuity of partnership has been there with some of the well-known companies such as the Angro Foundation and Sinangro Coal Mining Company. So most of these companies have actually supported us throughout in driving the sustainability agenda. On the other side, we had a very supportive Forest and Wildlife Department, because generally they would be doing this task. Prior to 2015, there was hardly any interest in the Forest Department and in doing plantation, which is why you can see Pakistan forest cover has actually decreased over time. But basically, with a very supportive private sector company, Sindh Forest and Wildlife Department, we had all the support that we needed on the ground to carry out these projects. So I think it's both the government and the private sector being extremely supportive for us. And communities are always there. We can't do any of these projects without their involvement. So they were always a very integral part of the whole equation, very supportive. I hope that answered your questions.
Yeah. Then actually, I'm also keen to know then, so it sounds like private sector was such a big involvement in Karachi, but for Tucson, was there any private sector involvement? It sounded like it was a lot more community and schools and parents and institutions.
Yes.
There were no.
Sorry.
No, there weren't. As you said, no, not very little or no private sector involvement, except maybe the local businesses. But that's mom and pop shop type local businesses, but nothing major. So it's all done at the community level, and also with government assistance in terms of finances and support.
So do you think there's sort of space, or maybe let's unpack this difference a little bit, because we will actually be talking about financing urban NBS in our next session. So this would be a good sort of segue just to tease that topic a little bit. Do you think there's space for private sector engagement, maybe for funding, or is it more like funding for these kinds of projects in Japan tend to come more from, say, the government? What's your take on this?
Well, one of the hopes that we had in applying for the OECM status is precisely that maybe there's possibility for private backing of some kind, private sector backing. But again, it hasn't come to that yet. So we're still, I guess, looking or waiting. Maybe we're not actively looking for private funding. We did get. At the local community organization does apply and get money from from other organizations that do educational stuff and so on. So we get grants for that, but that's not necessarily private sector, unfortunately. There are major corporations and wealthy folks in the neighborhood that we might target at this point, but nothing yet.
So that sounds like an avenue to think about for the future. And I'm seeing that there's also a question from the audience, or a comment from Kedarnath first, that Navi Mumbai has developed a flamingo park on Thane Creek at Airoli Node. I hope I pronounced that right. And the project also involves protection of mangroves and the adjoining wetlands. So I think mangroves and wetlands are a key ecosystem to support, I think, for a lot of cities that do have these ecosystems. Then I think I see also this blue post-it note. I'm not sure who has posted it, but I'll just read it out. I was wondering if you knew what the latest is on the Six Canals project. Last I heard that it had been paused, as well as how IUCN ensures that projects avoid green grabbing or displacement of local communities, as the Green Pakistan initiative has been criticized for doing. I think this is a question probably for Danish.
Yes, this Six Canal project has been severely criticized, especially by the lower riparians, basically the Sindh province. And basically because they fear there will be no water for the crops and even no water for people to drink, for the basic use. So that obviously has been severely resisted by the provinces. Lately, there was a pause in the discussions, and the last we heard was they had decided to shelve the project. But again, as is very common on social media, you keep hearing stories that no, it's not being shelved, it still is moving ahead. So as such, IUCN has been, you see, on occasion, IUCN has always advocated the role of environmental flows down the river towards the sea in the Indus River. And that is what our stance has generally been, both with government, policymakers. IUCN provides that input as and when it's required to. So it is certainly controversial, and we have to tread very carefully because we work closely with the governments, and obviously it's a government initiative. So what we have to do is to put in our piece of work, our advice, but we have to tread very carefully over here.
Thanks for the response, Danish. There's another question for you that's sort of in the making. I see it being typed. I'm not sure if it's complete, but what do local industries who rely on shipping think about mangroves? Don't they have to dredge for shipping lanes? I think this is a question from Taksan. Or
They do. We had a donor, CMA CGM. They have approached us. I mean, you see, whatever dredging takes place at, let's say, the Port Qasim, this is the major port in Karachi where a lot of this industrial activity takes place. So some sites already marked for development, and we had a case where we did plant mangroves for agro LNG, and dredging had taken place, which is why at least 150 hectares had been totally damaged. We took up the issue with the Port Qasim Authority, and thereafter it was decided that they would allocate sites, because we need PQA, the Port Qasim Authority, to approve sites where plantation can take place. So a lot of these companies are opting for this offset type approach, but they have to seek permission from this federal government. And like I said, these are enablers also because they are not resisting this work. I mean, they could easily resist it. They might say, no, we have all this area demarcated for port operations. But they are also mindful of the fact that, conservation needs to go hand in hand. So we are seeing a receptive approach from all sectors now. But of course, we have to also respect the boundaries that are given by them and do it beyond those boundaries.
so along the lines of sort of having authorities from the city giving sort of the authority for projects to happen, whether it's for business activities or for conservation. I'm thinking also about the role of governments, of local governments, in authorizing projects for conservation or for business development, or for both of them, for conservation as well as meeting people's needs. So on that point, I was wondering too, if Taksan, if you, in working with the city for the project, have you learned any key lessons, sort of like to any hooks or any tips for engaging with local governments? And Danish, I'll ask the same of you again.
Sorry, no, that's fine. Basically, it's I won't be able to say much about the local government because we generally get involved with the local government as far as the Forest Wildlife Department is concerned. We deal with them, and they generally are doing massive the Delta Blue Carbon project along across the Indus Delta. So they would prefer that they themselves are the ones doing the plantation restoration work because it's very calculated now, but they do allow us to do it. But when it comes to the within cities, so there is hardly interaction with the very local governments or the district governments, you may say. So that is very limited. So we have particular line department that we deal with, such as Sindh Environment Protection Agency, Sindh Forest and Wildlife Department, and the Port Qasim Authority, which comes under the federal government.
So even sort of the different, so the Port Qasim Authority is from the national government, the federal government.
Yes.
So then there's also the Karachi government that we will have that you work with. So there's lots of different scales.
Right. We work generally with the provincial government. Most of our work is with the provincial government generally.
Provincial government. So that's
Provincial.
also a different scale. So there's the local government, there's the provincial, and then there's the federal level too. So that's, I think, something we grapple with a lot. Many of us here are practitioners as well, working on urban cities and nature projects. Then I also have a comment or a question here that somebody had posted for Tak-san, that how did you mobilize the school children? How did the project start? Was it the teachers or students and their curiosity?
It was both actually. Sorry, my apologies. Sorry.
No, go ahead. No, it's okay. Yeah, let me answer the question about how it started. It's a good question. Part of it I think has to do with the confluence, but just coincidental coming together of a particular teacher who's really interested in river or environmental education, some of the local community members who were involved with the helping out of community, like PTA basically, who was also interested in outdoors activities for children and so on and so forth. And so it just kind of came together that way. But it was initially started by school children who read something about a river cleaning up somewhere else in Japan. And they're like, oh, the one thing about this particular school is that there's a river that runs right through in the school grounds. So there's always a sense of rivers being important for the schools. So the kids were like, if they're cleaning up that river somewhere else in Japan, why don't we clean up the river here? So I think that's kind of the how it started is sort of the story that's told. So, and if I can maybe just go on and refer to the chat box again, there's Mr. Nakamura, who's again the ward government, and to follow back on the question about how to engage with the government. I mean, this is one of the things that we've spent a long time developing a relationship with the local government. It's to the point where I can go and say, Mr. Nakamura, there's this thing that Mika-san has invited me to come. Why don't you come and listen in? So we can actually say something like that very casually, and that this kind of level of trust is something that is not something that happened overnight. It really took many, many years. So it's really, and it's just not me. It's, I wish it was just me, but it wasn't. It was a whole bunch of people who is behind doing this. And so it probably took about over 10 years to get that kind of relationship with the local government, let alone the prefectural or the national government. That's really, we're not even touching that. This is really a very local kind of initiative. And the other thing that he mentioned, Mr. Nakamura mentioned, is that one of the keys to the success of the project was having children at the center, and I think he's right about that. Because it's when we have all kinds of political problems, right? Political conflicts, party politics, differences in political agenda, and so on. But when it comes to children, once we get children involved, like everyone agrees that the children are important. Everyone agrees that that education is important. So that kind of erases all the political differences, it seems to me, and it makes, and not just at the local level, at the community level, but also in the government as well. So I think that people really rally around the idea that we're really trying to do something good for the future of our children. And I think that really is a message that we try to actually use in the this question about outreach, about the public outreach. Is really trying to get the children involved. And if I can just continue with trying to answer the question from Andre, invasive species. Yes and no. There's not an explicit emphasis on invasive species, except in our OECM application. But we are mindful of invasive species. What's difficult though is that because it's a very accessible stream, everyone throws in everything, so it's hard to manage invasive species in that way. And there's also the other water bodies that are connected to this brook is full of invasive species. So in order to deal with the invasive species problem, we have to deal with the larger, the entire river itself. So that becomes a bit difficult. So yeah, and again, Mr. Nakamura, just to read his statement, he says the story began with the class on the waste problem. After class, a boy called out, "Let's do what we can. That we can just you should do what we can do," and they became so they started to pick up basically garbage on the side of the river, not even going into the river, just side of the river, and that became an extracurricular afternoon activity that children got into, and that kind of spread into this larger sort of movement, so to say, within the school of let's clean the river, actually, so that we can go in the river. So, yeah, thank you.
That's a great ray of hope for all of us, I think. And thank you to Nakamura-san, who is in mentioning this in the chat and adding on to the discussion in the chat box. And I'm just going through also the chat box to make sure that we're not missing out on anybody's comments. Yeah, the insight on engaging youth and the power of youth to sort of or the power of wanting to create a better future for our children in I wouldn't say erasing or just letting people put aside their political differences for this particular cause. That's really great. Then Kedarnath is also agreeing to Nakamura-san that land use planning is critical for urban NBS or urban planning, really. Wow. We may even need a special one-on-one session with the projects just to learn about the details of how things are done. But we are running very short on time, and I am hoping if there's any last questions or comments, now is your chance to say them before we have to close our session. Going once?
I have one question. Sorry, if you
Go
allow
ahead.
me. Last question. So like Watanabe-san, how are you guys planning to take this forward? Are you guys going to replicate this to other rivers, or are you going to other schools to talk about what the children have achieved and what you have achieved through this project in terms of learnings and also how students have been sensitized? Just some thoughts.
Thank you, Anshri. I think our initial idea is to, this is a very small piece of a much larger puzzle, a much larger, it's inside a park, and there's also a river, it's the headwaters of a longer river. So we're hoping that we can expand this. Part of the OECM definition for at least the Japanese government is that we can apply for OECM if there's an adjacent OECM site. So we're hoping that we can use that clause to expand the OECM site to the entire park or the river. Again, Mr. Nakamura will hopefully help us with that. and so that's at least initially on our agenda. So thank you for the question.
Well, thank you, everybody, and I will close the discussion for now, and just quickly wrap up today by thanking everyone and sharing about our next briefing. We are hoping to have more discussions on NBS, where we're on a roll with this NBS topic, and our next session. Let me just share about our next session. Will be at the end of July, Urban Wednesdays as always, July 30th, and our theme will be financing urban NBS. So we will be having a speaker to share with us about how NBS has been financed in creative ways, and particularly with an urban lens, because it's sometimes really difficult for city governments to get the funding that they need to implement NBS at such scale. Today we did hear about smaller scale and bigger scale projects. And next session, please join us at a new time. We're shifting ourselves half an hour earlier to start at 9 a.m. in Amman and Jordan, 10 a.m. in Dubai, 11:30 in New Delhi, 2 o'clock p.m. In Singapore and Beijing, and 3 o'clock p.m. for Tokyo and Seoul. So please join us a bit earlier next time, and we will be happy to welcome everyone back again for the discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank
I'd
you.
like to just keep our tradition of letting speakers share, letting the attendees share any updates or announcements that you might have. It could be any call for proposals or grant opportunities or job openings or any events that you are aware of that you think would be valuable for everyone else to hear about. But thank you so much for joining us for our June session, and we will see you again next month. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you
And
very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye
Bye.
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 Karachi, I'll connect with you soon. I've been sick. I'll connect with you.
Thanks a lot, Taksan. And thanks a lot to Danish, too. Arigatou gozaimashita, Nakamura-san.
Uh, thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Bye
I'll
bye.
stop the video recording.
I think Nakamura-san has unmuted himself. Oh, okay. I thought it was intentional. Never mind.
Well, I stopped the recording, so if that's a concern, it's no longer